Fellow tennis nerds, I hope you are well. I'm here with Tim, my buddy from Prince, a really sharp guy in when it comes to racket design, and we have a new racket to talk about today. So first of all, how are you, Prince?
Uh,
Tim, sorry.
yeah, thanks, Tim. It's fine. I'm doing great, thanks, Jonas. It's really good to see you again. It's actually not been that long since we saw each other, but
No.
no, it's great to be on the podcast again and talk about the new tour rackets that are coming, which I think people have been anticipating for a little while. So yeah, we're really excited to be here.
Yeah, this is your bestseller, right? Like this is the one that most people are excited about. I mean, you have some pretty interesting frames now with the ripstick line. You have the ripcords and so on. But this one was kind of my like first real Prince, besides the graphite oversize. But that really got me back into the Prince territory. 2015, I think that was when you had like the black and green, right?
That's right.
The
Yeah.
Prince stores. Very good. So what's new in this one? It looks stellar, I must say. I mean, if you don't like this look, black and gloss, and obviously I'm biased with the orange. Is it orange? What would you call this? Is it more like copper?
Sort of a coppery orange, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, we did that purposely for you, Jonas, so that it fitted in
that's good. That's good.
with your stuff. No, yeah, the tour has been, it's been one of our best sellers for quite a long time. It's a racket that's been part of our line for a long time, through a few different iterations. Obviously, the one you were referring to, the black green tour, that was our first tour racket with TechStream, and that really kicked off this sort of cycle of tour rackets. And yeah, this new one, it looks very similar. Essentially, it's the same frame tools as we had on the previous versions, which, if you remember, were the black white ones that we introduced maybe 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
But they've been redeveloped from the ground up. So this year, for the first time, obviously we're following our new TechStream cycle. So all the new tours include the TechStream Xylon material that we have in our Phantoms and in our Rip lines. But for the tours, we wanted to do something a little more and really try to elevate the tour rackets to another level, because the game of tennis has changed. It's more aggressive, more powerful than ever before, and we just felt like the last generation of tours were maybe a little disconnected, maybe a little softer hit impact feel. They were really popular, but I think just the game has moved on so much. We just wanted to change it. So this year's tours include our new technology called ISO Fiber, which is actually a brand new construction for us on the frame. I'm sure you're familiar with the racket production process for a traditional racket, where we apply all of the different layers of fiber in different locations along the mandrel, using all the different angles for different functions across the whole shape, and then that's preformed. For this, we did a few different iterations in development, but essentially what we've done is we've sort of separated the 0 degree and the angle degree, and position them on parts of the frame to really optimize the performance of each of those different materials. And what we ended up with was we actually are wrapping the 0 degree, which is really controlling the main overall flex of the frame, around a foam core, and that's at the top and the bottom of the section. And then the angle fiber is wrapping all around that, which is then helping us with the torsion. And we've seen that it's performing better in both, regular flex and in torsional stability too. And it just produces an impact feel that's just that bit more solid, more connected than our previous version of the tour. And again, that was something that we were very conscious of right from the beginning of the development. Just because people are hitting a bigger ball, they're taking more aggressive swings, and just having that more dampened feel that we had on the other one, I think just wasn't really suited to where we wanted the tour to be for 2026.
Yeah, tennis keeps evolving and rackets have to kind of follow along, like that's how it is. And your like previous, especially the 98, which was new in the previous iteration,
Yeah.
was hugely like well received from Tennis Warehouse reviewers. I just put it up on the screen because I wanted to check like where your review count is, but it's like 59. So unless Tennis Warehouse goes in and do their own reviews here all the time, I don't think so. I know it's really well beloved racket and kind of flew a little bit under the radar compared to some other more popular like 98s in the mainstream, but it's a very well beloved frame. Is that something when you start like working on something that got a lot of like good reviews and critique? Are you a bit anxious about changing too much? You know?
Yeah, of course. You can always you can always risk too much and go too far the wrong way with something, and when you're changing a product that has been well received, that does play great, and I love the previous version of the Tour 98. um uh, I think it's just we have to be conscious to move with the times to create a frame that is a better version of what it was. And again, we went through a pretty hefty testing process on this one. We've taken our time. It's been 4 years since we introduced the frame, so we really wanted to make it right. That was important to us. It can definitely be nerve wracking changing something that's well beloved, that's had success. And again, I'm a big believer in the old Tour 98. It was a great racket. As you said, flew a little under the radar, but was definitely popular with the people who tried it. But we just have to be conscious to make sure that we're always trying to improve the product. And that comes through product testing, working with people, listening to feedback, where we did get some. There's always going to be some negative feedback, but we listened to that as well as the positive reviews, and came back and really tried to make the best product we can. And in this case, just take that little extra time to really test some different constructions and some different processes to just push it to the next level.
Yeah, it makes sense. But I understand also the feeling of like risking a little bit when it's been so well received, the previous one. But obviously, a more connected feel. It's something I felt when I played with this racket a bunch, and I really feel like it is more connected. I feel like I get maybe a bit more pop. Is that's the idea as well, that you a bit
Yeah,
more power on this frame?
yeah. I mean, again, you watch modern tennis. It's so important to be able to hit that point winning shot, and so yeah, getting a little bit more pop on the racket, I think was important as well. You'll definitely feel that with this new racket compared to the previous version. But yeah, it's definitely been a bit of a roller coaster. We went through quite a lot of iterations to get here, but we're super happy with where the rackets ended up. So yeah, it's
That's
fun.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. No, I'm keen to play with it more. I think it's a very solid frame. I think there's a lot to like about the 98 because people want a bit of control and but they still, like you said, like need to evolve with the game, which is like trying to have more power on your
Mhm.
shots and dealing with the balls, which are not as good.
Yeah, absolutely. And the 98 is a great frame for us. Probably my favorite in the line still. I go back and forward between the 98 and the 100p, and obviously I hit quite a flat ball, so that 100p just sort of suits my swing. But I have had conversations with people, during the testing process, and people have been gravitating towards the 100 310, which is also really interesting. So I think it's one of those that everybody has a different swing, and it's always a little subjective. Just to encourage people to go out and try the rackets and figure out which one sort of suits their game.
Yeah, so how do you work with the lineup here? You have the 98, then you have the 100 light one, which is 290 grams, and then you have the 100 slightly heavier one, 310, and in between those you have the 305, which is the dense pattern
Correct.
18 to 20, right? So
That
that's the main lineup, right?
that's the main lineup. We will also have two lighter options than that. We have a 275 and a 260 gram version. More for that transition from junior play, really. But yeah, the main lineup is the two weights of the 100 and 219 310. The 100p, which is the 1820 version. That's the one that Luca used for a long time on tour. Obviously evolved now, and then yeah, the 98, which was a new edition last time, but obviously it was so popular we kept it around.
Yeah, it was nice to actually catch up with you in person, but also to hit some balls with Luca, who seems like a really nice guy from the couple of interactions I've had with him. I had also in Indian Wells. How is it to have like a guy like that in your corner? Because I know you don't have the strategy to sponsor a bunch of players on the ATP or WTA tour, so but you still have him like there as kind of a little bit of a guide in pro tennis, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, Luca is now part of the Prince team, so he's working with our European team. But he's a great guy. He's such a hard worker. He really is diligent to give feedback, and he's happy to be out on court and test product with us and give his comments. And yeah, he was absolutely great down in Indian Wells as well. It was great that you got to hit with him and catch up with him a little bit there as well. But yeah, he's been an invaluable part of this process on the racket. Obviously, the tour is a racket he's very familiar with. He used it for a long time. He had some of his best results in his career. He got to top 10 in the world using the tour racket. So being able to work with him and get his feedback and say, look, this is how I felt with the last version. He was still using that at the end of when he was playing before he got hurt, to where we are now with this one, and seeing the upgrades. And he was really positive throughout that process. So that's absolutely huge for us, because having a player that's been a top 10 athlete and is still very much involved in the tennis world now. I know he's working his way back from injury, but he's doing some coaching. He's working with Arta right now, so he's still in and around the tennis world a lot. And to have a guy that's that connected to the tennis world, being able to give you real time feedback on product is huge. It's huge.
Yeah, it's a big deal because it's tough with getting time from pros, and now that he's obviously coaching currently, I think his wish would be obviously to be back on the tour and play some more events. That's the feeling I get from him, but obviously that's the body permitting, right? Like
Yeah, of course.
injuries are not getting they're not fewer injuries on the ATP tour now than it was 15 years ago. That's the feeling we all
No,
get, right?
absolutely not. I mean, they're right at the limit. It's the hardest sport in the world. It's the hardest sport in the world. You're out there. You can be out there for 3 hours in a normal tournament, and then play the next day, and it's a mental battle, a physical battle, a technical battle. It definitely isn't getting any easier, and the standard is so high. There's just no let up, no easy matches, and the training that goes on behind the scenes as well outside of their matches. It's like you're putting your body through it every day. So it's definitely difficult to come back, but he's working hard, and yeah, we all wish him the best of luck with that. But he's regardless, he's like you said, he's first and foremost a great human being, and just been a pleasure to work with. So you know that's great for us.
Yeah, I think that it's a great ambassador to have for the brand. So when we look at the different models, if we're back to the rackets, where do you perceive, like, if we take one model at a time, if we start with the 98, like, what kind of player level do you have, like, in mind for this racket? Obviously, there are many outliers, and players should play with what they feel is best, but there's usually like a little bit of the demographic, at least, for a certain frame.
Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, the tour line is, and has been our sort of players, modern players frame. It's an all-round, all-court racket that has precision. Obviously, now it has a little bit more pop to it as well, which is great because that's what's needed in the modern game. The 98 in particular, there is a real trend on 98s right now. It's a really popular head size. It's a little bit more compact. A slightly faster swing speed. Players that play from the back but are looking for that a little bit more dialed in precision, we're probably going to gravitate towards the 98. Again, it is very subjective, and you can change the playability quite a lot through string setup and whatever. So there's definitely a lot of variables, and it definitely can be suited for more players than just that type of style player. But yeah, that's sort of where I bucket it. It's very much goes up against those other sort of player 98 frames that are out there.
Yeah, I could see that, like blades and radicals and this stuff, and it's probably a little bit more powerful currently. This is my subjective opinion, but it feels like a little bit more powerful than the current blades and the radical, and but it still has a nice feel to it. It's not like overly stiff or anything like that, and I think most people will realize that when they try it. I think it's important to always demo. I mean, watching reviews and listening to podcasts is important, but then you need to test for yourself. It's for you or not. That's not with any racket.
Always, I always recommend people to go out and just try the product, get a feel for it yourself, because it is there's not a single player that has an identical swing to somebody else. I know there's some who have very similar swings, but it is very subjective. And yeah, so definitely go out and try the rackets yourself. I think, yeah, it does have a little bit more power probably than those rackets that you mentioned. But I think it's part of the new ISO fiber construction is we've been able to sort of isolate those characteristics of the frame. So it's the frame still breathes, which it doesn't feel rigid and overly stiff when you hit the ball. It still pockets nicely. It still has a great feel, but it is going to allow you to just get that a little bit extra pace on your shots when you need to ramp it up.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So definitely a demo. I like that one. I do also personally like. I thought this was my favorite. I'm not quite sure, but this is what I'm trending towards, and that's the 100p. So this one, 100 square inch 1820, is not like super common in the market. We have the Speed Pro from Head, of course, but this one has kind of like a good blend of like nice power, some forgiveness from the large head size, and still like pretty decent spin potential, I would say, for an 1820. Was this something you thought about also when engineering like the string pattern? Because it's 1820, you feel like it's going to be dense, but here you can actually get quite a good lift on the ball as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the 1820's been a part of the tour. The 100p has been a part of the tour line for throughout the generations of the racket. Again, this was the one that Luca used on tour. This exact frame with the same string spacing, and it is quite an open 1820. It does allow you to get some bite and some spin on the ball, which is important. I don't get that much spin out of it because Jonas, when we hit I hit the ball quite flat. I'm not generating loads of spin, so it does suit the sort of flatter hitter as well. Just because the way that the string bed flexes for that sort of flatter hit, I can just dial it in and get a little bit of dip right at the end, which is cool. But yeah, it does. If you are hitting a bit more of a spinny ball, you still can get that access to spin. I think I'm sort of with you. It's probably the one most suited to my game. I think the 98, just when I connect with it, if I'm moving my feet, which doesn't happen a lot often, but if I'm moving my feet and I get the 98 right out of the middle, the sensation is amazing. But I think the 100p is probably the best one for me right now for my game. So I'm sort of on the same page as you.
Yeah, I think that sometimes it's important to have the forgiveness of a 100 frame. I know a lot of players of all levels, like a lot of the consultations I do, and I do with like from almost beginners or 3 O's to top 10, former top 10 players, and it's um it's interesting like that a lot of players perceive that they should be playing with a really heavy 97 or 98, and then when you actually like look at it, or you think about it or you work with it, then it's like much better for them to use 100 or something more forgiving, because tennis is difficult, right? Like any kind of help you can get from the equipment, I think you should kind of accept it, because it is difficult to play tennis with the old school bats today.
Yeah, definitely. As I said, it is the hardest sport in the world. There's no comparison, and any sort of advantage you can get. I know there's a lot of people out there that go, oh, it has to be this weight, or it has to be this stiffness, or it has to be this string pattern. There's no one size fits all in tennis. Having a slightly bigger head size that's going to have a slightly bigger sweet spot, a bit more forgiveness from the string bed, a bit more flex in the hoop, just to breathe a little more. It can definitely be that extra 5%, 10% for any player. Of course, if you're absolutely middling every ball and you're able to race around the court and time every shot, sure, go with a smaller head size. There's nothing wrong with that, and it feels great. But otherwise, there's no reason to not go with a slightly bigger head size that gives you a little bit more forgiveness.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth testing, especially considering that there are rackets such as this one that has a denser pattern, so you're going to get a bit more control, and it's not, the beam is not as thick as like pure drives or these kind of Wilson Ultras and
Mm-hmm.
so on. It's a manageable beam width, like more comparable to speed. So I think that's definitely something for them to try. And then if you want like a more pop and more spin potential, I guess the 1618 rackets, whether you go 290 or 310, is the way to go.
Yeah, so both of those have 1618, and that's one that you know when we read some of those negative comments, that's one that we get is why is it a 1618 and not a 1619? And I'm I think I mentioned this on your podcast last time.
Yeah.
We can change the spacing on the string pattern to change the way it plays, even with two different 1618s or two different 1619s. We tested all of those patterns right from the beginning, and 1618 just sort of suited the frame. It definitely isn't as powerful and thick as a pure drive. That's not what this racket's intended for, but it does. Having the 1618 still gives it a really big sweet spot and gives it, enough power to really be able to hang with anyone. I think the 290-gram frame for us is a really great platform frame. We had feedback that it should be heavier, or the 310 should be lighter, and they should be closer together, and they wish there was one in between. I think 290, it's just a good frame that if you do want to go a little bit heavier, just adding a bit of tape or something to it to just adjust to your specs, it really does take that well. The 310 obviously it is that little bit heavier. It just makes it so solid on impact. It's like an absolute rock solid on impact, but still with that forgiveness from the more open string pattern. So really there's something for everybody there across the tour line to at least try and see which one matches with your frame. Like I said, I've had feedback from multiple people that 100 in the 310 is just really working for them on the new iteration.
Yeah, I think like when you look at specs, I think with something we discussed maybe before, but it's worth reiterating is that like when you look at a weight and a balance, it's obviously connected to each other, right? So if you have a 310, there's more mass in the handle, so it still plays whippy enough for a lot of players, right? So
Yeah.
I think if you just look at like the static weight of anything, then it doesn't make much sense. You have to look at all the parameters, and that can be too technical for many players. I completely get that, but we're a very kind of old-fashioned industry, tennis, that most people they look at like I want 300 gram 1619, and that's it, and they look only at that, and then like you can have 1618 290, which can play fine because there's more weight mass in the hoop, or you can have like a more headlight 310 and it's fine. So yeah, I think
Absolutely.
you need to be more open-minded in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand why it's got like that. There's so many options out there that, if you go into a retail store, it's really difficult for them to know the details, the flexes, the characteristics of every frame in such detail. So obviously they get bucketed into, well, these are the 300-gram rackets, and these are the 1690 rackets, and these are the 67 RA rackets. That's always going to happen. But I think it's important to understand that they can be different. One of the other ones that really gets me is the stiffness, and it's the same as weight. You can have a 300-gram racket, but all the weight be in the handle. Well, we can have a 67 RA racket and all the stiffness, like the shaft be really stiff and then the hoop be really flexible. So the bending characteristic is completely different. Whereas you can have it more flexible in the shaft and then really stiff in the hoop, and the overall bend is going to be the same. So the RA is going to be the same, but the way the frame flexes is going to be completely different, and they're going to play so differently. So that RA number to me is always one that throws people as well. So it really does come back to going out and trying the rackets.
Yeah, because there's also like, or is there foam? Is there any kind of dampening in the handle? There's so many features on a tennis racket in what you work with the layup, like, and all these things that it's tough to look at just like a specification sheet. So it's that you can't really tell how the racket plays just by looking at the spec sheet. I think that maybe was how people used to do it a bit before, but now it's really like difficult to say
Yeah,
based on specs.
yeah, and all the brands are getting so good at we're on 10th generation, 11th generation, 15th generation of rackets. They've all been, so well developed now that every brand is fine tuning. So it's really a case of it's definitely not just down to the spec sheet. The rackets are improving from one generation to the next generation or changing to suit the way the game changes, but the specs could almost stay the same. If you just look at them on paper. So again, it's just more complicated than it always looks from the outside.
What do you see from a, like, if you look at the, which is a good point, like from consumer perspective, the discussion of the specs and so on. But in your range, you have Legacy as well, which is kind of oversized rackets, and that's suitable. Like I in my head, like veteran doubles, I'm thinking about. But it's not only that, of course. But how do you see like the issue with you're new to tennis, you know nothing about equipment? How do we reach these people to stick to tennis and not go to pickleball or paddle or other sports? Like, what can we as kind of an industry and you as a manufacturer, a brand, do to get people more involved in tennis from your equipment point of view?
Yeah, and look, James, count me in as a veteran doubles player any day because it wouldn't be the racket that I'd gravitate towards for my everyday hit. But if I was playing some doubles, actually picking up like a Legacy 105, it's so fun to play with. It has such a big sweet spot. It's so easy to maneuver a net. Yeah, look, we have a full range of rackets from the Phantom, which has that sort of classic old school feel, the tours, the rip line, which is obviously more powerful, intended to be power and spin frames, and then up to the Legacy, which is really for that shorter swing. It's lighter weight, it's easy to handle. Look, the pickleball, paddle, they're great sports too. I really enjoy playing them as well. There's nothing quite like tennis. The sound of the ball when you hit it, when you connect with it's just a different sensation and a different game. But obviously, if you're a beginner or you're getting older and slower like I am, there's no harm in trying a bigger head size, lighter racket that's got more equipment. Like if I go and play golf, I don't go and use like a bladed golf club that I'm not going to enjoy it at all because every time I'm just a millimeter off center, my whole arms judder and I slice the ball right. Like I want something that's going to give me some help so that I can enjoy myself. And it's the same for tennis. Like get a racket that has the technology, has a lower swing weight, bigger head size, bigger sweet spot, and then you're gonna enjoy your tennis so much more. And then once you're enjoying it, it's just there isn't another game like it. Again, paddle and pickleball, I really enjoy them. They're great sports. I'm gonna go play paddle this afternoon. Like it's really fun to play, but nothing quite gets you like hitting a tennis ball out of the middle.
No, I agree, and I think that's something we need to kind of get people to feel, right? Like that's the issue, and until you maybe feel the sensation and the joy of that kind of pure strike or like that winner or something that feels like very connected, because like comparing it to paddle and so on, like you have the strings and the ball, like that connection when you hit the sweet spot, as you said, is not, it's only, it's sound, it's feel, it's like a really rewarding sensation. But it's going to take a while before you get enough of those that you are like, I like tennis.
Yeah.
So I think this is important, that you start on the right foot. I think a lot of players maybe start on the wrong foot. They string too high. It's too stiff of a string. The racket is too demanding, and then they end up leaving tennis and going to something else, which is fine as long as you exercise and all that stuff. But as a sport, I think it's important to have something relatively forgiving and rewarding in the
Yeah, and
same breath, kind of.
the industry's created some of its own problems a little bit. I think obviously polyester strings are great. Like at the top level, if you're a good player, if you can activate the strings, it's great. I used to go and do some adult clinics, and I'd go there, and you got players who, no disrespect to the players, they're not swinging their racket hard enough to even move the strings to generate spin, but they've all got polyester strings and they're all playing with heavy rackets, and I'm like, well, why have you got polyester in there? If you're not activating it, doesn't it feel harsh to you? And they're like, but the string doesn't break, so I don't have to get my racket restrung. And I'm like, yeah, but you've lost all the tension in it. It's not doing what you want it to do anymore. So it, part of it is that I think you can get cheap polyester strings. They don't cost that much. They're not going to break for the club players, so they just put them in. Whereas they're probably going to enjoy their tennis way more if they're using like a soft multi or something that gives them a bit more forgiveness, and using a bigger head size. Then they're going to enjoy the sensation a lot more, particularly if they're hitting off center or they're not swinging the racket as hard. So um, the industry's created that problem a little bit. Yeah, I'm definitely not saying don't go and play pickleball and paddle, because they're fun. They're fun social sports. In particular, I think we need to encourage more tennis with junior players, with kids in schools, and get people really loving the game from the beginning, because that's how we all got into it, and just getting plenty of access to tennis. So
I agree. I think it's also like being playing maybe more doubles, getting doubles more in the spotlight for maybe the audience that are not as good at like moving or are slightly older or have some injury and so on. Like the tennis court is a large court to cover compared to some other sports, so we could definitely do with some more doubles and people playing that. And then you have the choice, like, okay, doubles a little bit more social. It's a bit easier on your joints, and you can play with a slightly larger head size. You cover the net, so on. And if you really want to go like hard and work out, then tennis singles is the best way to go. But
yeah,
I often think about this situation with the rackets and strings because I get it, quite often as well. I was doing a consultation today, and the player was a 3035, self-assessed, and using like a Volkel C10 Pro. And that's like a heavy racket, very tough to get around. I mean, it's a classic, right? But
no,
it's just like, in my opinion, too much. And then the risk of arm injury is high, and the risk of not having like really nice like rallies is also quite high.
yeah, and then it just doesn't become fun for them, and then they'll take up something else, or they'll find another way to spend their time. So it's important that you know people are at least having these consultations, or they're talking to their club pros. They're going to be great sources of knowledge for you to understand what racket you should be in. Because if you just go by, well, that's what somebody's using, or I can play like Carlos, no problem. Like it just doesn't work that way. So you got to find something that makes the game fun for you. That's really what it comes down to.
Yes, and if you want to play with old school rackets and or like 95s and so on, that's fine too, as long as you know what you're kind of missing, or you're self-aware to see what, like, this is kind of a challenging one. But like you said, I think tennis in a way with rackets being endorsed and players wanting to copy pros and maybe overestimating their abilities, that is an issue we have in tennis in general.
Yeah, and look, I'm a 95 fan. Don't get me wrong. I love a good 95. We may even have a tour 95 around the corner at some point soon too.
Oh
So
wow, I was going to ask about that. That
yeah,
was a legend, right? Then
yeah,
that
it
was
was.
maybe my favorite before the
Yeah,
95.
yeah, and I think on the second generation, it's funny, we've been having internal conversations about it. Second generation of the Tour 95 just didn't work quite the same way as the first gen. So it's something that we wanted to bring back this time round, but we just want to make sure that it's 100% right, and then has its own moment to shine. So it's probably something that's going to come, a little later in the year. So obviously keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, 95s are really fun, but they are demanding. They're definitely more of a challenge. But if you connect with it, there is definitely a sensation. But you just got to be really precise. So for most people, that isn't going to be the right racket. It's definitely more of a smaller group of players that are going to get the best out of it. But for those players, we want to make sure that there's something fun coming down the line for them as well.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, the 95s, they still exist in some different forms from different brands, but they usually have like one. But I think having one, it makes some sense also from there's gonna be that like group of players that like, I love myself a 95. My one-handed backhand feels better on with a smaller head and so on. So I completely get that. When it comes to strings and stuff, are you working on strings as well, or is this kind of like a more side thing for you. You're like mainly focused on the rackets as Prince.
Yeah, no, we are working on strings. We have a few really interesting projects in the hopper. Probably not this year. I think they're probably gonna come out early next year. But definitely some interesting things coming down the line. Um, yeah, strings are obviously as important as the racket. It's like having a car and putting the wrong engine in it if you get the wrong strings. So we have some good strings in our lineup now. Like I've been playing a lot with the Vortex, and particularly with the Vortex Triad hybrids, which is like our poly hybrid string. So it's like a triangular string and a round string, and just playing around with that string has been a lot of fun, and probably one that's just under the radar. People aren't seeing that string very much, so I definitely recommend people to try it because it's really fun. You can get loads. Again, I don't hit with a lot of spin, so even for me, I'm getting access to spin, which is cool. But yeah, we have some new polys coming out further down the road, and also a really interesting multi. So yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah, there's definitely a life in the old multifilaments. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you completely when you said like there's a lot of players that play poly that might not need to play poly. Maybe they hit very flat, or they just play poly because it's a durable string, and that's when you really get arm issues, like you're playing a dead poly for ages. I think we need to accept that restringing fee, whatever that is. It's usually not that much money
Mm-hmm.
to restring your racket, especially if you're not a string breaker, right? So I
Yeah,
think it's better to get fresh equipment.
and the thing is, people should be restringing their polys as well because it loses tension so quick that you're really not like the pros are changing their strings every game. So it's not they're not playing with it for ages and ages because it doesn't break. It's just it needs replacing, but people don't, and that's when they start having issues with it as club players. Yeah, there's definitely life in multifilaments. I mean, there's some really good multis out there. You hit with me when we were down in the desert. We hit with a racket that had Singut in it, and I still love the sensation of Singut. So like it's actually still a really really fun string to hit with. It's not that it's a bad string, it's just been around for a long time, but it's been around for a long time because it still plays well. That's why it's still there. So there's definitely different options out there that people just aren't trying. So we're looking at ways to move those forward as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. You had some prototypes we tested, and they were strung with Syngut, right? But it still had like you could still generate spin and you could still play with it, and it's that sensation, that sound is still something that a lot of players, they don't need to play with poly, like you say. So it's definitely something I would like to comment on as well, because there's too many players playing with poly, and they're like, oh, this racket is stiff, or this racket is this, and then it's really the string that kind of ruins a little bit of that experience.
Yeah, again, like matching up the string to the frame is so important. Like I can have a Ferrari and put a mini engine in it, and it's not gonna it's not gonna perform the same way. So often obviously our rackets we've tested with our poly, so we know that it they fit well, particularly for the tour frames. But yeah, just you have to just make sure that you get the string to match your game and to match your frame. I mean, we obviously when we hit the Singer, that wasn't intentional. I wasn't like, oh yeah, let's go out and hit with Singer. We got those proto rackets in like the day before we hit, and obviously they're with cut plastic parts and with the Singer string in. But it just shows you that even like we're used to hitting with polyester strings, like we're playing a good level, but still sometimes just going back to something tried and true and older with a different sensation can still be really fun.
Yeah, it's an experience sport in one way. So that's what I would say. So now you're on tour. You're doing podcasts and talking about the new Prince tours. When are they out, and what are the next steps in your like rollout plan now?
Yeah, so the tours are launching on May 19th, right before French Open. Yeah, obviously I'm doing some podcasts and I'm getting out there and getting on court and being with people, which is really fun. It's the best part of this job. We work hard all year. We test a lot of product, and then actually getting to see people's reactions to the product and hearing what they feel about it is the best part for us. So being out on court with people and getting to hit with them is going to be great. We're doing some activations in Paris around the French Open when the tours are launching, so that's going to be really fun. Obviously, we're going to do some stuff with Luca out there. We're going to get on court with some people and hit for the first time with the public. So that's going to be really fun. And then, yeah, as I said, there's some other tour rackets in the line coming out later in the year, which are going to be really fun.
Exciting. You have some busy time, and but it's obviously great to go and be at tennis events. Like India Wells was a great way to connect with tennis fans. I loved it there, and then obviously French Open is an iconic event and always packed and full of tennis purists. How do you feel a difference when you're like in the States doing tennis work and in Europe traveling?
Yeah, and look, it's great to be in front of people talking about Prince and talking about tennis at any time, anywhere. I will talk about tennis with anybody. So that's stuff that I love doing. We get comments when we turn up at some events. Oh yeah, I didn't know Prince were going to be here. Like we don't see you guys around much, so it's definitely really cool for us to engage with people and be around people. I'm really looking forward to Paris this year, obviously because we have the tour launching at the same time. We're going to get in and amongst it and with the people and have some fun moments there. So that's going to be great. Obviously, BMP Indian Wells is such a cool tournament. It's such a cool tournament to be at, and we catch up with almost everybody in the tennis industry when we're there as well. So that's always fun. But yeah, they're always different. Every tournament has some different character. We do US Open here because right now backyard as well, and that's a whole different event. Even though it's in that's in the States and Indian Wells in the States, they have a totally different vibes around them. So yeah, any time we're in and amongst tennis is a good time. So
That's a great way to phrase it. I agree with you. Tennis is a passion and it's a fun industry to be in for sure. And also, best of luck, of course, with these Prince Tour launches. I'm sure it will be a success. They're great playing frames. They look even better than before, I would say, the black and the copper orange. And you have some interesting models coming, and maybe even the 95 later on. So yeah, best of luck, Tim, and we keep in touch as always.
appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me on, Jonas. It's been fun.